All right, good evening, all. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Town of East Bridgewater Planning Board. It's Monday evening, January 9th, 2023. We'll call it 7 p.m. First item of business is minutes. We have a bunch of minutes. We could start with October 17th.
Move to waive the,
Over there, Roy, on top of the gray folder.
to waive the formal reading of the minutes of October 17th and December 5th and accept those minutes in the form presented.
Second.
All right, so that's a motion, Riley, second O'Leary. To accept both the minutes of October 17th and December 5th. Any further discussion on the motion?
No.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We'll show that as unanimous vote of all 6 regular members present and voting. That's 6 in favor, none opposed. Okay. Next item on the agenda is Layla Estates road bond reduction. You all should have a copy of the updated road bond estimate. So this was a road bond that got calculated by me, using the standard form that we had used for many, many years. Since this road bond needed to be placed before we had hired our new engineering firm, and our old engineering firm was not available, the road bond form did actually come from our prior engineering firm, John Delano and Associates. So if we note the bottom, I think the bottom explains where we're trying to get to, or where I think we're trying to get to at this point. The current road bond is in the form of a tri-party agreement between East Bridgewater Planning Board, Summer Street Realty Trust, and Bridgewater Savings Bank, now Bluestone Bank. It's still in the amount of $172,274.03. The tri-party agreement was signed back in February 4th, 2020. And not unexpected with COVID and all of that, it's taken them a little bit longer. It's taken them about 3 years instead of 2 years, but they are done all of the major work on that road bond form that is passed out, and the one that has revision 3, January 9th, 2023 up in the heading. That is the one we're being asked to vote on. Although the number looks a little bit high, when you total up all of those little minor things, that they all add up pretty quickly. We also are required to take a contingency. We've been advised in the past a 20% contingency and an inflation adjustment. Part of the rationale behind that is that if the town were to have to seize the bond to get this work done, the town would have to go out to bid. In almost all cases, we'd end up having to pay prevailing wage for the labor. So private contractors can get the work done much more efficiently than we can. The second thing, although not quite as a bigger part of the picture, is that we want to do our best to make sure that the developer has a clear incentive to finish the work and do all of the rest of the cleanup pieces. And there's about 15 or 16 of them listed here that all need to be done prior to releasing the rest of the bond. So I think at this point we could entertain a motion to lower the road bond amount per the estimate that's in front of us to $55,364, or some rounded off number if you would prefer to do it that way, but somewhere in the amount near that number.
And Roy, has the surveyor fee at the very bottom been paid, or does that need to be taken into account as well?
according to our records, that I could tell it has not been paid yet, so that would also be a fee that had to be paid before we release the final amount on the bond.
So I'd make the motion that the road bond for Layla Estates, currently the subject of the tri-party agreement as referenced, is reduced from the amount of 172,274.03 to $60,000.
Second.
Okay, that's, excuse me, that's a motion and a second to reduce the road bond for Layla Estates to an even $60,000. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And we'll show again a unanimous vote of all members present voting, 6 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. Why don't we invite Janelle to come up and talk to us since she's here? Are you here for,
I just have a question.
okay?
Well, I didn't want to interrupt because I know you guys had your other thing.
No, that's fine. We've got, the rest of our stuff is primarily housekeeping kind of stuff, so feel free.
Okay.
And but just make sure you, if you will, identify yourself for the record, Janelle, okay?
Certainly. Would you like me to sit there or?
If that's okay, because
Please, okay. Got it.
the sound always works better when you're near the microphone.
Never been accused of someone not being able to hear me, but that's okay. Gina Rotundi, Country Farm Road. So, a few months ago, I had put forth a Form A plan for Castle Place. It's my parents' house, 11th hole of the golf course. Whitman had signed off on it, you folks did not. And the reasons that I was given was that the way I had put it out there, it would create a non-conforming lot for lot 39, which is the access lot for my dad's house. And then there are questions about the ownership of the access lot to my dad's house. Since that time, my attorney has met with town attorneys, my attorney has spoken with Lord Gardner, and I believe everything has been resolved. It's my understanding. This morning I recorded a 81X plan for lot 39. I also recorded a confirmatory deed to formalize the subsequent sale. I sold it to one party, that party sold it to another party, and to make sure that there was no misunderstanding as to the ownership of lot 39. That stuff went on record this morning. So I have a couple, I printed 4 copies, just to let you know what is coming. But at this point in time, since I haven't heard anything back from you guys for the past few weeks, I'm going with, all right, we're good to go. So you will be getting, this is a current copy, or a copy of what is coming your way, and I have one, so there you go.
Okay.
Grab it, I can make some copies.
I can pass it down. Okay.
So that will be coming to you this week, and what I know your next meeting isn't until early, mid-February, something like that.
February 6th will be our next meeting.
So when it arrives and gets, formally accepted, I guess, here, then I know the time frame will be going. So I'd just like you all to take a look at it, and maybe you can talk about it, or say yes when it shows up, when the Mylar comes in, we'll sign it, and I can move forward with getting my dad's house separated from the golf course.
So I think the only thing I can comment right now, Janelle, is that the building inspector still has some serious heartburn over the fact that he has in his files, and you're aware of it, a deed for 64 Old Oak Street that shows its frontage is 152 feet, which it needed to be legally when it was conveyed. So
I would-
we're not going to discuss
Yep.
the legalities, but
You say, so he has a deed in his file, because that I don't have, and it's not on record anywhere.
Well, it's the original deed when the parcel was sold to the Tires, 2011, where it's got the meets and bounds description. I understand there was a clear attempt in
And town council East Bridgewater Town Council has come to an understanding there. So,
well, we've just been party to a court case that ended January 4th. It says exactly the same thing that we're saying, and that lot needs 152 feet of frontage. A court case that's going on for 7 years. And it just so happened that the decision was filed January 4th. There's a clear deed conveying that. Now, I understand there was a good faith attempt to clarify that, to say that meets and bounds description shouldn't have been there.
correct.
I have to beg to differ with that. I saw a sketch that Bernie Monroe, who was working on all the old Oak Street stuff for John, Bernie Monroe out of Land Planning in Hanson, who was working on all the old Oak Street stuff, which is where those meets and bounds originally came from. And I have a perimeter sketch that shows that lot with 152 feet of frontage.
It would be wonderful if then you could share that with me. Because
You already have it.
I don't have it.
You have the meets and bounds that came from that plan.
I understand the meets and bounds came from somewhere, but I don't know where they came from. Feel free to go down to the office and dig, because I've been digging and I don't have it.
Well, where did Larry get them from?
From a deed on book 5504, page 170, which stems back to 1963. That's all, that's the first time I saw those. But what I'm saying is town council, East Bridgewater Town Council has come to an agreement, has opined in this matter.
Well, we as a planning board need a confirmation from Patrick, who's the zoning enforcement officer, as to where that leaves 64 Old Oak Street at this point. Because it's clear that for at least 7 years, it had what was legal frontage and legal area. The legal area problem is not your problem. Not completely your problem. That's a illegal conveyance that was made by another third party that you have no piece of.
Correct.
I think we spoke to your attorney about that, and we suggested to be very, very careful about taking that back parcel and conveying it back to the Ritter properties.
And
We
I
don't want to do that.
And I don't care about what's going on there. I care with lot 39.
Okay.
Because that's part of my father's house lot.
So I wish,
And I wish the two of you, and I say the two of you because I've been waiting for 3 weeks now.
I understand,
And I've been trying to do this for a year and a half.
I know that.
So I'm trying to get it done.
So,
If someone could respond, then if you're not gonna, if we can't do it here, if you can respond to my attorney, so at least he can talk legalese with you or Patrick or Kevin or whomever, just so I can get it done. That's all I'm asking.
so Janelle, back when you were a teenager in 2007, 2008, there were,
Okay.
figured I'd start in a positive vein. There were a couple of plans filed, one of which was a discontinuance for a portion of Old Oak Street, and then one was a Form A plan, which shows the lots that are in this area as now being fronted on Oak Street. I don't know whether you're aware of those or not at the moment, you know.
I
whether
know,
it's-
I know that there was, I mean, the only discontinuance that I'm aware of was when the new Oak Street came out, and that was in like the 1950s.
So basically, there are plans at the Registry of Deeds which discontinue Old Oak Street from here to here, and which then have frontage these lots are now showing as fronted on Oak Street. And I'm just wondering how that
What?
kind of...
No, actually, Kevin, I had that same problem a year and a half ago. Rob, we need to move this down further.
It's the stuff over there across from the Learning Center, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so there was Bernie-
Identified as
Bernie-
64 Old Oak Street.
Well, there's a bunch of confusion in numbers in the documents that were done by Bernie Monroe at Land Planning out of Hanson,
Okay.
who's no longer with us. He was doing all the work around Old Oak Street back in that timeline, 2005 to 2010. So we saw him pretty regularly here, so. The part of Old Oak Street that was discontinued is actually down here.
Right.
Old Oak Street used to come down through and eventually come out somewhere down here. So the piece that's in here, I think it was 1955 modification to Oak Street, took that big S-curve out of it and straightened it out and left a loop on the north side and a loop on the south side. So during that period of time, a surveyor, and I believe also an engineer, Bernie Monroe, was doing plans on all of this for Ritter Farms at that point. It might have been a different Ritter name. There's been a bunch of different names over the years
Yep.
of Ritter properties there. But the sketch that I saw for the piece up on the top is the exact same meets and bounds that are in that deed of 2011.
I mean, I can give you the reference, and Robert, I don't know if you can pull that up from the Registry of Deeds site.
What's the
Maybe
reference?
yes, maybe no.
Maybe not.
The references are Plan Book 53, Plans 1088 and 1190, filed 12/31/07 and 1/31 of '08 respectively. And I think, I'm pretty secure in what I'm saying, that is that area. I don't...
But, Roy, you haven't found any recorded plan with those meets and bounds, have you? I've looked, and I haven't.
No recorded
Rob,
plans.
if you go to search criteria up at the top there,
We were told
top
that-
left.
We were told immediately after the,
Yeah, right there, yeah. And go to plans, book search down below, straight down. Yeah. And then it's 53.
we were told that before
1088.
that was going to be
Page
conveyed.
1088.
An 81X plan, since it's a true perimeter plan, would be filed at the Registry of Deeds. It apparently was never filed.
So then just hit on
Deed
plan.
was recorded that transferred the land with those meets and bounds on it,
It's
but
hard for me to see back here.
Keep going, over to the right.
just pick any part of that, it'll do it
There you
actually.
go, right there. Perfect.
And view details?
View images, yeah. over to the
Images.
right, yeah.
Yeah, that's across from the driving range. The driving range is down in the bottom center. So it's flip-flop from what we were just looking at.
So, yeah, part of the problem is that north is this way. That's south. All right, now you've got it in the same
Okay.
orientation as it was
Okay.
before.
Okay.
So
That's-
the piece that we're talking about is up
Yeah, it's
top
up
there, and
north of that, yeah,
This is the
okay.
bottom loop
Of Old Oak.
that went away.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that's currently owned by Watson and Dan.
But that's the same group that was doing all of the work back then on all the old Oak Street stuff, Land Planning Incorporated. But I also did a fairly thorough search, and I never found the purported 81X plan that was ready to go that I had seen a draft copy of.
The first time I saw those same meets and bounds was in a plan dated 1963, or a deed dated 1963. But I haven't found anything else.
So I guess my point is to protect the value of that land, and that land being that existing single-family home at 64.
64.
I need the building inspector to tell us what we need to do. And I think we're gonna have to file some form of zoning letter. And if not file it, at least notify all of the owners, 3 owners, yourself, Emil and Amelia Tire. Technically, I guess now they're 2 different owners. Because Emil sold the back portion of that to what I assume is his wife, although I don't know that for a fact. I just know, I'm assuming.
Emil sold both the Lot 13, the front piece, and Lot 38, the back piece, the same 2 pieces that I sold to Emil, he sold those to Amelia, which are on this, what you have up there, 64, in the rear parcel that's identified as 0.
I'd have to do more research, but there was a very quick flipping of deeds there, and then eventually, right after that, I mean, literally right after that, the front lot, which is now back to its pre-zoning change size of many, many years ago, of like 130 feet of frontage with 22.5 or whatever square feet, which we know is illegal. The frontage, we could debate a little bit, the area is not debatable. The back of that belongs to 64.
And from what I understood from town council, your town council, was that
Your council actually agrees with that,
that
that back piece belongs to 64, but that's not your issue right now.
that's not, exactly, that's not my issue, but on the front side, the frontage, it was a non-conforming from a frontage standpoint. Because the access parcel, the driveway, was in existence prior to 64 ever being built, and it's always been used to access.
We can agree on that, but it was also in common ownership. Whether or not there's a driveway there or not is irrelevant to the common ownership statutes. So I'm going to let, Patrick has to make the final call on what he wants us to do with that.
Okay, so Patrick needs to do what? He needs to opine as to whether or not this Form A can be signed or not. What does he need to do? And then from there, I can move forward to get what I need.
We need something in writing from Patrick, giving us some advice as to, because he's the only guy that can make a zoning call, and this is a zoning issue.
Okay, so do I put forth the plan to him?
Well, when
I'm trying to understand, what's the path forward, because I'm
when
not
when it
making
gets
head-
filed, he's going to get a copy. He gets a copy of all
Okay,
plans.
so I filed the plan, and then he needs to.
He gets a copy of the plan,
Yep,
and then he'll need to advise us what to do. Whether or not you realize that he's the source of the original problem,
I'm aware of
in
that.
that he pointed out to us that, wait a minute, according to the records we have, that lot has 152 feet of frontage, and based on this Form A, it's got back to 130 somehow.
So he needs to be involved in these conversations,
Yes.
not you, and not
Well,
Kevin.
it's all of us, actually, but, because there's multiple different issues associated with that whole thing.
So when
First,
Patrick gives his answer or his opinion, do you all then do you take that and run with it? Do you put all of your eggs in his basket, or do you then
Not-
say,
not
oh, wait a
necessarily.
second?
we need to know exactly what his suggestion's going to be. We've discussed this, and we haven't decided exactly what to do. My thought is a letter ought to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds, which we did, we being the Planning Building Department, long before Patrick's time, back in 2016, when we had a slightly more egregious problem that's very similar to this, where a piece of property got separated off a house lot without a plan being filed that clearly got endorsed by the planning board okaying that. That's what this court case was about.
And you said that it was just settled, or it was just,
Decision just came from the court after being remanded from the State Appeals Court for the second time. Came down on January 4th.
and it was Town EB versus,
I'm more than willing to let you see a copy of it. It's a public record.
okay, well, that's, I mean, I'd go look it up if it's come down, so,
I'll give you a copy of it.
okay.
I think the concern we have is our number one mandate, and it's the, you can say it's the motherhood and apple pie statement at the beginning of the zoning act, but the planning boards, and that motherhood and apple pie statement's it's also in the subdivision control law, that our basic duty is to protect the value of existing land within the town. Then it goes on to say, this is how you do it with all the laws and rules and all that kind of stuff.
Understood.
So we're trying to figure out what to do here so that we don't create a problem that,
Well, and that's, going to your point, that's why the first plan that I gave you excluded lot 39, because we couldn't figure out, or it wasn't understood as to, access, ownership, zoning characteristics and whatnot, and then you came back to me and said, but then it creates a non-conforming situation.
well, the problem with leaving lot 39 standalone is under the Form A plan not requiring planning board approval, every piece of land either has to have 150 feet of frontage in that zone, or be physically owned by an abutting piece of property and doesn't have lines around it. It can't be a separate parcel. In the original plan you gave us, 39 was a separate parcel
Right,
with
because it is a separate parcel.
42, with 40, not under the laws in Massachusetts, it's not. It is not. It's owned in common, it doesn't have 150 feet of frontage. It's technically owned as a single parcel by all that other stuff. That's way, way beyond any zoning protection for grandfathering anything, by many, many years.
So with lot 39, again, going back to,
Lot 39 has to either be owned by 64 Old Oak Street, or the Ritter property, which we'll for now call Castle Place. It cannot be a separate piece of land.
well, if it's owned by Castle Place, the Castle Place, not the Castle Place lot, but if it's owned by Castle Place, it's common ownership, but
It's
it's.
got to be part of the lot. It has to be physically part of the lot. When you file a Form A plan under today's requirements,
Yep.
all those intermediate lines have to go away.
Right,
They're no longer this parcel, that parcel, and another parcel. It's
Okay.
going to get a new number from the assessor's office, and it'll be a single parcel of land.
right.
And for that reason, we can't leave 39 standing by itself.
Okay, so that's,
And I think, and again, I don't want to get into the legal stuff, I'm not an attorney, and I don't want Kevin to have to opine legal things at a planning board meeting. But if you filed an 81X for parcel 39, that's a no-no. That's a no-no.
as what I understood it.
That's a no-no. No more. That's a no-no. Because 39 has to be physically owned and has to be physically part of the abutting, one of those two abutting properties. It can't legally be a standalone piece. That's been case law since Preston Hull back in the 50s.
Well, I guess there's
You've got
some,
bad advice. I'm sorry, but you've got bad advice, and we'll leave it at that. You need to file that. We'll talk,
Okay,
I'll
so
sit down
so-
and talk to Patrick, and if necessary, we'll have him come to our meeting and discuss where do we need to go here.
okay, so I'll have this, put the Form A plan, file it with or deliver it to the planning board.
File it in the office.
Yep.
Get it. It'll get dates, the office will get a date stamped downstairs,
Yep,
and then we'll go from there.
all right.
Okay?
Well, thank you. At least I got a pathway forward. And that's why I was here. Appreciate it. All right. Have a good day, guys.
Good night.
Thanks, Neil. So we don't need to go over it tonight, but there is a copy of that court decision, I think, in everybody's little binder there. As expected, that judge was extremely detailed in his findings. And he found not only was the letter that was filed valid, but it was valid for two different reasons. You could use either one of the reasons under current land use law. The bad news is that the applicant immediately filed an appeal. I won't get into the wording of the appeal, but there will be many judges reading it who will be offended. That's all I'll have to say on that. Let's go to, if we could, there's two other items on the next two items, actually, that are on the agenda. 35 Hereford Lane. It's up here somewhere. So 35 Hereford Lane was a one-lot subdivision approval, which ended up with a standard condition, which for a one-lot subdivision hadn't been there, shouldn't have been there. That's condition 11. So condition 11 is a condition that's part of our standard roadway subdivision approval. Normally, there's two coats of pavement put down on a standard roadway. 2.5 inches and 1.5 inches, I think, is still our standard. A standard subdivision roadway, we require and have required for many years to have a 18-inch Cape Cod berm on either side. We've required, as item 11 here states, when the base coat pavement is installed on the roadway, it should include an integral single installed Cape Cod berm. Well, this isn't a roadway, and it's going to be a single coat paved driveway, some 10 to 12 feet wide. So the applicant, after he recorded this document, picked up on that condition and said, where did that come from? Because it's not on the plans, and it wasn't in anything that we had discussed in our meetings and the hearings. And I told him, well, that's not in the condition, because that's a one-lot subdivision. And when I went back and looked at the actual letter, it is in the letter. And that's one of our standard conditions that should have been deleted, which was my oversight. So what I would like is a motion from the board to issue a letter of modification for Mr. Philip Daru, 35 Hereford Lane, and for what we've described as on the plan as Hereford Lane extension, to delete paragraph 11 from the letter of approval, and I think that's, yeah, that is paragraph 11. It's not 11 in the conditions. It's not in the special conditions.
I'll make the motion.
So we've got a motion, Lawler. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion, Lawler, second, Bates, discussion.
So, as I remember, this is we've got driveway, if you will, coming up, and that edge would be close to the abutter's property, no? Thinking of it correctly?
Yeah.
On the right-hand side, it's going up as you drive in?
It'll probably end up being 20 to 22 feet away based on the plan we filed. Because it's a 40-foot layout, and the driveway is going to be on the inside. Well, I guess if you say the abutter, it'll be
The abutter, if I'm
The existing-
standing at the
existing house.
base of the driveway to the right.
it's going to be the furthest away from that, actually. We don't have that here, right? The plan that Larry drew showed the driveway offset to the inside where the drainage is going to go, because that's the way the land slopes naturally. The land all shape slopes kind of to the rear bowl, which is in the middle of the Daru property to the rear, back about 500 feet. Master of Technology is founded, I believe.
Ah.
So that's the actual edge of the layout, the edge of the pavement's in here. And everything slopes this way. It slopes from there to here and this way. Well, providing they build it that way, obviously, but. Because back here is in the high 40s and in the 50-ish. Everything up here is 52, 53. It crowns just beyond the front yard of the existing dwelling, and then comes downhill to the back there.
I had was that side.
So the intent of the layout was to dump all that water to the rear, into the sloping area that eventually ends up being a huge bowl of 2.5 acres, which some of the year is wet, some of the year it's not, but it's an isolated wetland. Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion to delete condition 11 from that letter, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right, we'll show that as 6 in favor, none opposed. That's your unanimous vote of all members present and voting. So here's the next one, which is another modification that we've been asked to make. And this modification is the modification for the special permit for the used car license at 60 Franklin Street. Right, it's Franklin Street, right, not Oak Street, yeah, Franklin Street. So, and this is a modification to the second version of this, which we modified a different condition earlier. We heard back from the attorney that they weren't happy with condition 1 and the special conditions as well, after they reread it a few times, apparently. So after doing some work, having discussions with the applicant, taking some pictures and explaining to the applicant why we wanted that doorway to not be used any further except in emergency uses, I think he finally understood what we were trying to do. So he has agreed to change that door to be clearly marked for emergency access and egress only. Add a new door to the rear of the building on the left side. And that will be the entry into the garage and office space. So the intent was to get that door that right now goes directly through the drive-through out of there. So this is the parking on this side of that, on this side of the barrier. The drive-through lane is behind it, and that was the door they were using to get in and out of that space. So what we've agreed to do is they're gonna mark that door for emergency access egress only, because the fire department doesn't want the door blocked off. They're gonna cut a new door to the rear, which goes into the same space as that door.
Do those garage doors not go into the same space?
The garage doors do as well, but they said they wanted a door, a regular door as well, because I offered them, well, why don't they just go through the garage door? And they said that's gonna be too cumbersome in bad weather to have to open 18-foot high garage door to get in and out. They've agreed they'll cut a new door and put a new door there. And as was the first revision of the special permit, if you could go to the third picture there, Rob. The first revision we made was for them to move the car spaces to this side of the building and use that door, because there's an office, there's a space inside that door as well. So that's where the used car business goes. That was already covered in the previous modification that we had done. And I have talked to both the applicant and the attorney. They both understand, I think, where we've been trying to get with this, and they're both in concurrence with this. So the plan would be to add that language exactly as there, unless Kevin feels it needs to be edited
My only
slightly.
question, Roy, would be, is that actually the south side? I thought that was the west side of the building.
The back of the building is actually the south side. Well, southwest side. It's not 100%.
Just for the sake of clarity.
If you want me to add to,
Let's say adjacent to the existing garage door. How about that?
we can do that.
There you go.
We can do that.
So there's no confusion, not on our part, but on the applicant's part. And with that change, I'd make the motion to further amend the approval granted for 60 Franklin Street by adding the language with respect to the access doorway as just discussed.
Second.
So they've got a motion, Riley, second Ken, to proceed with a modification of special condition 1 of the special permit for 60 Franklin Street. Any further discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, thank you all. We'll show that as a final vote of 6 in favor, none opposed, to modify that language. Next item on the agenda we have is 582 Oak Street. That's the new buildings, potentially, and special permit that's been issued for the HVAC contractor. We have the letter in hand from the town clerk that said that appeal period is now over. So we have the Mylars here, right?
They're right next to you.
Right next. So I have the letter from the town clerk indicating that there's been no appeal taken. We now have the Mylars that are ready to go and ready to be signed by the board. Which is going to be this package here.
So, Mr. Chairman, it appearing that the various conditions that were outlined in the decision of November 3rd, that they have been incorporated into the revised plans, I'd make the motion to approve the signing of those.
So we have a motion, Riley, do you have a second?
I'll second it.
Second, Lawler. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We'll show that as unanimous vote of all 6 regular members present and voting, 6 in favor, none opposed. So just a couple of other things, run through these quickly. We have a letter dated January 3rd to both the planning board and the building inspector, noting that the site on Highland Street There's a new sign on the building, and I'm not sure how new, because this has just come to my attention recently, and this is the first I've seen a written complaint to my knowledge. There's a sign at 231 Highland Street now identifying one of the businesses in that building as the Shootist. Not sure how long that's been there. I know there's a daycare center in there as well as, I believe it's the Triple D tree service runs out of that site. That is a specially permitted allowed use in that building. There is nothing in the existing special permit that would fall into, I think, something that has the name The Shootist. The letter explains also that there's been outside shooting at that site fairly regularly recently. I can attest to 2 days fairly recently where I could hear gunfire at my house, and I took a ride by, and it was clearly coming from that area. That area abuts a residential subdivision known as Captain's Way and a bunch of other streets. There's also a residential house, I believe, directly abutting that property to the west. It's certainly not a location where a gun should be discharged.
So, you're right. I mean, you're saying that in addition to the daycare that we just permitted, there's another daycare in that building?
Yes.
Yes, there is a daycare in that building as well, which
Wow.
is just up the street a
Right,
ways.
right, yeah.
Yes. That's been there quite a while, actually. I'm guessing 15 or more years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent mix of uses.
So in any case, the building inspector has a copy of this letter. I have a copy of this letter. It came in an envelope that was postmarked January 4th, 2023. I'll have a discussion with the building inspector about it. I'm only mentioning it because it is a special permit. The building inspector, zoning enforcement officer, is the sole enforcement officer for those in the town. There are potential other enforcement areas, but the building inspector, zoning enforcement officer can discuss with other departments in town what other issues are there. So that's just basically an information piece. Last thing I think I have tonight is some good news from our local government here in the state of Massachusetts, in that House Bills number 4971 and 4972 were both adopted in the late hours of the last session before they adjourned until the next session starts this year.
So we get the raise that John put in for, is that right?
I did.
Were passed on to the governor, and it was just reported to me just now as I was down talking to the selectmen before this meeting that we have confirmation that they were signed during Governor Baker's last few minutes in office the morning before he left. So both those bills have been signed. 4971 is the act establishing the official North Bedford Street Sewer District in the town of East Bridgewater. So that's been done and signed. The second one is an act relative to the procedure for municipal acceptance of subdivision roads in the town of East Bridgewater, which is, I'll describe it as a workaround to the current problem we've had with new subdivisions that, I say new, they were new when I started here, that's 40 years ago, so. For those many subdivisions who had insurance bonds that went belly up and a lot of developers walked away. So.
That was the action that was taken at town meeting in
Yes.
2021, maybe?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
I believe that's correct. A local initiative petition that we voted at town meeting, I believe it was 2021, and sent on to the State House. It has been approved and signed. The final language allows us to accept those roads with a document that has been recorded at the Registry of Deeds, which in this case would be the subdivision plans. I understand at the DPW implementation level of this, that leaves some potential issues, but since we don't have actual as-built plans. But the town is authorized to accept those roadways based on recorded plans at the Registry of Deeds. So going forward, I'm going to be working with the office to identify as many of those subdivisions as we can quickly. Now, they're fairly easy to identify to some extent because in the list of accepted and non-accepted town roads, they kind of stick out like a sore thumb. So you can pick them out pretty quickly. I should be able to pretty quickly find the book and page number references for all of those plans because although I'd rather not be, I'm becoming very well versed on how to search things at the registry. So hopefully sometime in the next couple of meetings, we'll have a list of those that we're going to plan on proposing with the Board of Selectmen, jointly proposing with the Board of Selectmen to take to annual town meeting for acceptance. Obvious ones, the most obvious ones would be Rolling Hills, which is up off of Bridge Street, and Fieldcrest Estates, which is off of Crescent Street, I believe it is, right? Yes. There are a bunch of others, none of them are as big as those two, but there's multiple other ones.
River Road.
River Road is another one that was,
North
that-
Water Street is not accepted.
we'll have to talk about some of those others, because some of those others don't meet the requirement that there has to be a plan recorded at the registry. But in any case, that's, I think, the last update I have for tonight. If anyone has anything else, feel free, we'll have an open forum for a second here with members. Anybody have anything else?
I would,
Get out raise, Ed.
no.
No.
They didn't-
I
they
heard
didn't sign it.
we're all getting a 300% increase this year,
There you go.
Oh, nice.
Excellent.
so,
I would, just before you close, I'd just give a shout out to 401 North Bedford Street. I thought that little medical building there across from Compass came out very nicely.
Yes, it does.
It's a very
Yeah.
nice addition to the area for sure, so.
Yep.
yeah, it's very well done.
Commendation.
Significant capital investment and
Yeah.
hopefully a long-term, solid taxpayer to the town, so.
They did a nice job. And now we can go to Disney with our raise.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess at this time, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh. All good things must come to an end.
So I'll take that as a motion. Lawler, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Ken. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We'll show that as unanimous vote, 6 in favor, none opposed, and we'll call adjournment time is 7:54. Thank you very much.